The number one no in the early days were women's health is a niche market. This is not a big enough market. And so, I overcame that because I was kind of like, well, sucks that you don't know how to read numbers, but I'll go get this from some other guy because there's a lot of money in this market. So that was, I mean, when you have when you're armed with facts and what someone says is just something that's wrong, you're kind of like, all right, whatever, next.
That's Kate Ryder, the founder and CEO of Maven, the largest women's and family telemedicine network. I'm your host, Patrick McGinnis, and this is FOMO Sapiens, part of the HBR Presents Network. We live in a world of overwhelming options, and whether you're an entrepreneur, an executive, or just someone who wants to make the most out of your time and money, committing to just one thing can feel impossible. That's called FOMO, and it's short for fear of missing out. How do I know? Because I coined the term. Welcome to FOMO Sapiens, the show where I ask entrepreneurial thinkers how they make personal and professional decisions in a world of overwhelming choice. FOMO. FOMO. Right now, a lot of people are asking me whether it's a good time to start a company. Maybe you've lost your job and you need to figure out the path forward, or perhaps you have extra time on your hands and you're dreaming big or even small entrepreneurial dreams. Either way, the idea of coming up with a business that you can build for yourself is an attractive idea, and it's as attractive now as it has ever been. And I believe that it is a good time to start a business, but it's also a complicated time. Think of this. Companies that were the toast of the startup scene just a few months ago, companies like WeWork, Airbnb, and ClassPass, are now struggling for survival as the office, travel, and fitness industries reel, and no one quite knows what these industries will look like in the future. Meanwhile, companies like Zoom and Peloton, both of which were at the right place at the right time, are booming, and both have seen their stock prices more than double since early March. It's incredible. In the absence of offices and gyms, this is their time to shine. But being at the right place at the right time is only one way to succeed. And in fact, here's the thing. Most changes in how things are done in a given industry are not tectonic shifts that happen overnight. No, instead, they are gradual, and you don't need to be lucky to spot them. You need to pay attention, do your homework, and build conviction. Sometimes the best ideas are hiding in plain sight. But even if you do come up with that great idea, decide to pursue it, and build a compelling case, getting people to take you seriously, and more importantly, to provide you with financing, can be daunting. My guest today knows exactly what that feels like, and she knows what it is to have $1 billion idea, but to be told no over 100 different times by investors before eventually raising a round. Kate Ryder is not your conventional founder. She started her career as a journalist at The New Yorker and The Economist, and then with the goal of eventually launching her own company, she moved on to become an early-stage investor at Index Ventures in London. While there, she recognized that the women's healthcare market is incredibly underserved, and she started Maven, a digital clinic for women that connects patients with healthcare practitioners anywhere, anytime via the internet. Since she founded the company in 2015, Kate has raised nearly $100 million and now counts Reese Witherspoon, Natalie Portman, and Mindy Kaling among her investors. Plus, Maven was named the most innovative company in healthcare by Fast Company in 2020. Kate is amazing, and if you've ever dreamed of starting your own company, you're going to love her story. And then stick around for the FOMO moment of the show. As you'll see in the interview with Kate, starting a business as a solo founder is an all-encompassing task, but you do not have to do it alone. You're not going to be able to do it alone. In fact, you will need to get help from other people if you're going to succeed. So I'm going to give you some tips on how to get people to help you for free as you're working on your startup idea. And now onto the interview. One of the big reasons that I wanted to talk to Kate is that she was very early to the telemedicine industry, and she was among the first of such companies. So in a world where so much is going digital, I wanted to ask Kate what she's learned over the years about how you can create real connections across screens.
Yeah, so I think one thing is that video appointments with clinicians, particularly when someone's seeing a patient face to face in a virtual setting, you can still pick up on things like a patient blushing, a patient, pausing. You can actually still build a pretty solid connection. And so, for remote work, it's why video meetings are so important. And we're not all just dialing into conference lines. Because I know that, what I'm hearing from some teams and some friends is that the one long Zoom call or, that people are on all day gets really exhausting. But at the same time, you're still connecting a little bit when you can see someone else's face. So yeah, I think that's just really important. And, obviously we were one of the early telemedicine companies. We started in 2014. And so yes, we have always thought that you can do a lot virtually and a lot, even healthcare, you can do that remotely.
You started your career as a journalist, traveling around, working for the New Yorker, The Economist. Now you're the CEO of a company that's raised nearly $90 million. So not an obvious transition maybe, but you've said in the past that being an entrepreneur and being a journalist have a lot of things in common. So I want you to unpack that for me.
When I was a journalist, I often didn't get direction for a story, right? I had to go figure it out myself. And so there was a lot of creating structure from a very unstructured environment. And entrepreneurship is very much the same way. There's no direction on really how to build a product in women's and family health. We have signals. We hear from the market, we hear from our patients, we hear from our providers, but really it's about creating the structure from the chaos, finding the story, the narrative among all of the signals. And then that's really our strategy, right? As a business, as we kind of build for the future. And so, I think that's very similar. The other thing that's pretty similar is with the way that I make major decisions for the business, I often rely on a council of advisors. And so, obviously I make a certain amount. I don't have time to rely on a council of advisors all the time, but when we're making a big strategic decision, I want the board to weigh in, or I'll want some of our executives to weigh in, or I'll want, some of our advisors to weigh in. And so that also helps me, make decisions when I've never made a decision like the one in front of me before. And I think the same goes for journalism. You're constantly talking to sources and learning from them to kind of build the strategy, the story, the narrative.
Do you have a threshold when you know that you need to go externally for advice? Like, how do you sort of know when that point comes along versus something you just want to handle yourself?
It's really when I haven't seen it before. So there's a certain amount where I've seen before and I feel totally confident and that I'll just answer it or figure it out. But, as we get into new markets or we get into new patient populations, Medicaid is an example. We had never worked with Medicaid patients before. And so I went on a listening tour, and I'm still on that listening tour where I'm talking to a lot of people who work with Medicaid populations, with that audience, to understand what are engagement patterns, what are user behavior patterns. And I'm learning a ton, and it's informing how we're thinking about products. That would be an example of where I would kind of, go on the listening tour and get advice, but obviously making a decision about how to negotiate a contract with, an employer or marketing in the employer. We've done that before, so we wouldn't need help doing that.
You're getting into this really critical part of entrepreneurship, which is that, so many people think, well, you just have an idea and you go and build it. And it's so much more than that. And so much of what great entrepreneurs do is research and go out into the market and talk to people and find people who agree or disagree with them and gather data and then use that to make better and better decisions. Now, let's go back to the early days of Maven. Tell us about, first of all, where the kernel of the idea came from, and then sort of really concretely, what were the steps that you took to figure out sort of how to actually get the business started and have the data you needed to be able to make some smart early decisions?
I was working in venture capital in London. I knew I was going to leave. I knew I was going to start something. I'd already tried to start a few things that didn't work out. And there was the common thread between a lot of the ideas was helping women or helping some kind of underserved community, and putting out a mission-driven product that was making the world better. So with Maven, what really came up was I was looking at a lot of digital health companies, and my aha moment was when I started looking at telemedicine and telemedicine companies. A lot of the users were disproportionately women because they were using telemedicine for their kids, for their families, for their pregnancies. And yet none of the platforms had the core women's health providers on them, like OBGYNs or nutritionists, physical therapists, midwives, doulas, lactation consultants, even mental health providers that specialize in women's unique needs. And I think, it was this one size fits all approach that I think hasn't served women in the healthcare system at all. And so that was the aha moment, which is how do you verticalize how do you verticalize and build a women's and family health platform? So women's and children health is a lot of what we cover. How do you do that? And then bring in a lot of the really interesting digital health technologies to make it a whole, end-to-end experience. And so we started with telemedicine because that was one of the big trends of the time, and still is. I think it's one of the most disruptive healthcare trends that we're seeing, to bring healthcare outside of the clinic and into the home. And so even though it's, people have argued through the years, is this good? Is this not? Does this drive more cost? Does it not? I think, you talk to any CEO of a major health system or a health plan, and they'll say the distributed power of telemedicine and the disruption that it's caused is tremendous. And so really wanted to, use that as one of our core features for our care delivery model. And so we built the largest kind of women's and family health telemedicine networks. When we launched in April 2015, we were the only ones. That was our first claim. We were the only women's and family health telemedicine network. We had about 300 providers across 12 specialties, and now we're the largest. There's others in the market now. We have 2,000 providers across 20 specialties, and highly vetted. We only accept 35% of those who apply. So that was kind of some of the early days of telemedicine. But then we pulled in a lot of other interesting features to really bring the experience of starting a family, growing a family, to the modern age. Sometimes, particularly when I have my two kids, still parts of it feel like it's stuck in the 1950s. So we now have a reimbursement product. We have, Maven Wallet. We have breast milk shipping. We have, even within the experience in the platform, we have care advocates who act like concierges to help people navigate their benefits and their childcare. And so we've layered on a lot of different other features. And so that it's just this one, model that truly everything we do is catered and built for the woman and the family.
Okay, so you were a first-time founder when you launched this business. And we all know that fundraising is hard all the time. Even for companies that have raised lots of money, it's always difficult. But I imagine when you first got started, you heard no a lot, right? No, sorry, for millions of different reasons. So tell me about sort of what was the number one no that you got when you were fundraising, and how did you overcome that?
The number one no in the early days were women's health is a niche market. This is not a big enough market. And so, I overcame that because I was kind of like, well, sucks that you don't know how to read numbers, but I'll go get this from some other guy because there's a lot of money in this market. So that was, when you have when you're armed with facts and what someone says, it's just something that's wrong. You're kind of like, all right, whatever, next. Then we got no's around as then it became kind of clear to people, oh, this is a large category, maybe the largest in a $3.5 trillion market. Then we got into, oh, well, this bet that you're taking, we don't think that, this is going to come to fruition, or we don't think you'll ever work with health plans, or we don't think that you'll ever drive the C-section rate down because no one's ever done it before. And I think that one of the things that we have going for us, on the innovation side against us on the fundraising side is this is a new market. No one had actually done a lot in this market because it was so underfunded. And so there's a lot for us to do. And when people are like, well, it hasn't been done before, you're kind of like, well, you're right. That's the opportunity.
And you had been a VC, right? So it's not like you didn't know the game. So as you thought about I always call the VC a game of foes, because the companies want to create FOMO. The investors have FOBO. They're waiting for a better option. And so they don't want to move. They're waiting for the perfect deal to walk in the door a lot of times. So if you were sort of putting your cap back on, you understand how the game is played really well. How, as an entrepreneur, did you get people over the hump and create the FOMO to commit?
It was like sheer numbers.
Tell us, how many people did you meet with?
In the seed stage round, over 100. Series A, it was pretty big as well. It was maybe 30 to 40 something. I don't, and obviously, our last fund round was a handful. So that was great. But yeah, and so I think it was just, I basically at a certain point in each fundraise stopped talking to people who either didn't know healthcare or weren't a woman, because if you didn't know healthcare, you didn't understand our market. And if you didn't, or a woman, you didn't understand, you didn't understand the user problem that we were solving. And so if you found, oftentimes a lot of men who didn't understand healthcare, it was like, forget about it. And as an entrepreneur, I think your natural bias is towards optimism. And so, you have these conversations, and by the way, actually, there's lots of wonderful men who don't work in healthcare that wanted to invest. But the whole thing is VC is by partnership. So what kept happening was you would meet, and oftentimes they were like dads themselves. They were in their 30s, 40s, whatever. They'd see the opportunity, they'd understand the problem, but then they'd bring it to their partnerships, and the partnerships were largely men, and so there was always detractors, and so that was really what killed us all the time. And so I think that at a certain point, it was just finding that partnership, or that really well respected VC that could drive things through a partnership to get it across the line, and that's what happened.
Good takeaway here for investors or other people who make decisions in groups is when everybody in the room looks the same, it can be hard to appreciate things that are outside of your experience. Now, you just closed another round of funding, $45 million. Congratulations. And that closed in February. When I read about it, something stuck out for this fundraising, which I thought was kind of interesting and kind of cool, which is that among your investors were Reese Witherspoon, Natalie Portman, and Mindy Kaling. So I'm curious, I wonder from your perspective, obviously they're incredible people and very successful. And, people who are successful in Hollywood, they get there because they're smart. There's in any field where somebody's at the top of their game, they're not just, a pretty face, they're smart people, they're savvy, and they're shrewd. But I'm curious from your perspective, where's the value of having investors of like those three on your cap table?
All three of those investors are part of the founders of Time's Up. And Jess Lee, who's our board member from Sequoia, is one of the founders of All Raise. And so All Raise and Time's Up really built a strong partnership to try to just promote more gender equality at the top of industry. And so I think that, they came in at our Series B. And then they obviously came in again at our Series C, and so they were very kind to let me use their name in the press release, although that was like the headline of every fundraising announcement article. But yeah, I think that as it's great having them on the cap table and as investors, because as we continue to think about not only, business growth, but also really thinking through some key advocacy issues that we care about, like, for instance, paid leave, then, they're amazing champions of that. And so there's a lot of opportunity to potentially work together. And they're one of them and myself may be talking about something right now, some more exciting stuff to come on that front.
Okay, watch this space. Now, as I think about your business going forward, it's interesting. I was talking to my mom last week, and she had a doctor's appointment, and so she did it over Zoom. And my mom, who never used Zoom before a month ago, is now like the queen of Zoom, as are many of our parents, as are many people we know. And so it's kind of funny because you had a business that people thought was niche, which is now the only way to do it, really, except for sort of at least this moment, sort of particular procedures, but everybody is moving into telemedicine. And so that's interesting because obviously you were first to the game and in your space. And so you have this sort of incumbent advantage, but now obviously everybody's your competitor in a way that they weren't before. So how do you think about the whole landscape as it evolves in the future?
It's incredibly energizing because we feel a little bit as a product team how we felt 5 years ago before we launched. We're launching into this new market where we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know how certain trends are going to play out. And that's really where it feels like healthcare is again, in terms of even looking at our own space. What is the future of the prenatal care model? How many of those appointments are going to be virtual? What are the different devices that you might use, at home rather than going into the office? And so, I think that we're really excited and energized, particularly because building a telemedicine platform is actually quite hard. I know there's some telemedicine in the box products, but if you really think about all of the edge cases around, scheduling, rescheduling, ordering prescriptions, being licensed in every state, ordering labs, having super high quality providers, tracking and all of the data and tracking that you need to put on all of the appointments, capturing patient data. I mean, that takes like years to do. So we have a great head start there. And then really it's about what's additive to the whole model going forward and how is it going to be reimbursed. So those are some of the big things we're thinking about. I think but I think what is going to shake out is the fact that there's going to be a lot of consolidation coming in healthcare. I mean, you have, the health plans are going to be making a lot of money off of the crisis. I mean, they're the big economic winners, whereas the health systems are obviously struggling a lot right now. And so it'll be interesting to see how all of that shakes out. And I do think, for the consumer, the best thing is not all of this consolidation, right? You don't want a monopoly industry like we're starting to see today. So at Maven, we will remain independent and continue to grow because I think it's just really important for patient-centered healthcare to have diverse players, with varying goals for their products.
Now, as medicine goes online, not everybody is kind of adhering to the sort of highest standards. And there's been journalism around the fact that there are certain service providers out there, like in the male reproductive space, that they're not, people are able to get prescriptions to things without necessarily having a lot of proof that they need the drugs. And so I'm curious, as you think about this very landscape where there's, some people are playing by the rules and others are a little bit looser, how do you make sure that you stay above the fray and that the fact that others aren't adhering to the rules doesn't sort of taint you?
Yeah, I think it's that happens in every market, not just healthcare. And I think it's just knowing that we're playing the long-term game. And so a lot of the moves that we're making are because we're playing the long-term game and we're not just looking for, those short-term bursts of profit that might lead to an acquisition or might lead to, pleasing a board. Because I think with our board, at least our board as well understands that, we're in this to truly build a better model of care for women's and family health. And so, I think it's that balance, but it does all come back to roost, in my opinion.
All right, Kate. So I read in an interview that the question that people ask you the most is, how do you do it all? You have 2 kids, you're a CEO of a company, and you noted, and I think this is a fair point, and everybody should pay attention to this because you don't want to be asking this question, is, you have a husband who's also very hardworking, successful, great guy, and both of you change diapers and nobody asks him that question. So I don't want to ask you that question. I want to ask you a different question. So tell me what I should ask you today.
You could ask me what book I'm reading.
All right. Tell me, what are you reading?
I just bought a book by David Kennedy. This is a little bit of a downer to end the podcast on, but I just bought a book by David Kennedy on the Great Depression. So I think that there's a lot of parallels to how we're going to be living over the next few years and some of the things that we're seeing to that decade in American history. My grandmother is 92 and has lived through many wars, but she still says that the biggest change that occurred from just a everyday behavior point, she thinks occurred because she lived through the Great Depression, not even necessarily World War II or Vietnam or whatnot. And so I wanted to really learn a lot more about it. And so I am reading that.
And when you finish, if you need to cleanse the palate with something a little bit more uplifting and practical, you can read Fear of Missing Out, Practical Decision-Making in a World of Overwhelming Choice. Kate Ryder, thanks for being here. Best of luck.
Thanks, Patrick.
FOMO. And now it's time for the FOMO moment of the show. And today I want to talk about how you can get people to help you with your startup or your startup idea without going broke. Recently, I've been reached out to by a number of people who are listeners to the show or maybe have read one of my books to ask me about how they can start a business without a lot of money. Because right now, of course, we're going through big changes in the economy and in society. People are losing their jobs, or people are realizing they might lose their jobs, and they're looking for the next big thing for them or the next small thing for them. It doesn't have to be that you're building a billion-dollar company after all. And so I wanted to give you some tips about how you can get going. And of course, getting going on your own is really tough. You may be good at one thing or 2 things or 5 things, but you're not going to be good at everything you need to get going with a new business idea. So here's what I want to tell you. Number one, think about what you do well, and then think about what you don't do well, but where you need help. Then find people who can help you with your idea. Explain to them that you're getting started and that you don't have a lot of money right now. Now, you may be asking yourself, where will I find these people? Well, you'll find them in your community. You'll find them at former jobs. You'll find them at your university where you studied. You'll find them on LinkedIn. Don't be afraid to just reach out to people who could be a good fit for what you're trying to do. Don't be shy. Once you find these people, then you need to come up with an arrangement with them. Some people are just going to want to help you because they like you, and that's okay. Don't be afraid to take help from others. You may have a chance to help them down the line, and I bet you've helped lots of people for free in the past, so don't feel shy about letting people just kind of help you out for no reason but because they want to be part of what you're doing. Now, for other people, you will want to offer some sort of payment, but it doesn't have to be in cash. Hey, sure, if you have the money and you want to pay somebody, go for it. But a lot of times we can't afford to pay people for things that we need help with, like getting a website up or figuring out how to do a marketing campaign. And so what I recommend you do there is turn them into 10% entrepreneurs. As many of you know, I wrote a whole book on that subject. You can check that out, but you can also find lots of information about how you make somebody an advisor in your company. That's what I call it. You give them shares in your company in exchange for help. You can find that on my website at patrickmcginnis.com. And I actually have contracts you can download that you can use to set up this arrangement between an advisor and you. The important thing is to have a clear understanding of what exactly they're going to do and what you are going to give them in exchange for their work. Now, finally, if you don't have a company set up quite yet, you can also barter your talents. You can figure out something they need, they can find something that you need, and you can trade. And that's a great way to get started to see if you like working together, and then maybe in the future you can find a way to formalize that through some sort of advisory arrangement. And that's really important. You want to write things down, no matter if you're doing something where somebody's just helping you out for free or if you're getting into an actual business arrangement. You want to make sure that you write things down, that you have a clear understanding of who's going to be doing what, when, how, and for what. Because I can tell you from hard-won experience, if you don't write things down, even if you're the best of friends, later on you might remember it differently, and that can lead to conflict. And it's just not worth it. You're starting a new business. You're trying to build something new. You want to get people on your team and you want to make your life less complicated. And if you don't write it down, things can get really complicated really fast. So for all of you who are thinking about starting a company or actually starting a company, feel free to reach out to me with questions or ideas, and I'll be happy to write you back. Or you can also ask me a question that I can talk about on the FOMO moment of the show. You can get me at letsconnect@patrickmcginnis.com. You can find me on Twitter at PJMcGinnis, on Instagram at PatrickJMcGinnis. So definitely reach out, and I look forward to hearing from you. FOMO. And that's the end of another episode. If you have an idea, a story, or a question, you can find me on Twitter at PJMcGinnis, on Instagram at PatrickJMcGinnis, and at www.patrickmcginnis.com, where you can also take the official FOMO Sapiens diagnostic and find out if you're a FOMO Sapiens. FOMO Sapiens is part of the HBR Presents Network. Theme music is by Mike McGinnis, and editing and post-production is by Josh Elstro. If you like today's show, please be sure to rate it and recommend it at Spotify and at iTunes. And as always, you can find me at patrickmcginnis.com.